Good evening and welcome to Mets 360 here on Riverside. I'm your host, Brian Jura, and I'm very pleased to welcome back to the program Prospect 361's Tim McLeod. Tim, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. I always enjoy talking up the game with you. And you put together a fine list of questions tonight, so I'm sure your listeners will be very entertained by the discussion.
I sure hope so. For those of you who joining us for the first time and don't know Tim, Tim is a fantasy baseball expert, and he's not a Mets fan, but he's a fan of the entire game. So it's really interesting to me to get out of the echo chamber and talk to somebody who maybe isn't focused on the Mets 24/7 like me and some of our listeners are. So, Tim, from a non Mets fan's perspective, give us your thoughts on the players that the Mets acquired at the trade deadline. And those are Gregory Soto and Tyler Rogers and Ryan Helsley and Cedric Mullins.
I think they did a fine job, Brian. They didn't have a lot of holes to fill that were going to be possible to fill, in my opinion. Hey, you can always upgrade your starting pitching, but as we saw, starting pitching is near and dear to everybody. And virtually no starting pitching moved. I think the biggest potential move might have been the Jays picking up Shane Bieber. But again, starting pitching is tough to procure. So, with Soto and Rogers and Helsley, they beefed up the bullpen. Okay, they don't need, when you throw Diaz into the mix and Stanek and on and on and on, they they're only going to need about 5 innings out of their starting pitching. And I think that was the theme of the trade deadline, being that there were no starting pitchers virtually available. Beef up the bullpen and provide that extra insurance. And yeah, I think they did fine there. And I like Cedric Mullins. Okay, he covers a ton of ground in center field. Defensively, he's pretty much as good as anybody out there, and he's going to bring you a little bit of pop and speed. So uh, I think overall the Mets did very well. I think they addressed needs and they filled in holes, and now we just sit back and see what the stretch run brings.
Now, both of us are graybeards, and we remember the time where a starting pitcher could pitch 3 games in a 7 game series like the World Series. But
Right.
that simply doesn't happen anymore. And anybody who watched the World Series last year knows about the Dodgers and how they used relievers in lieu of all of their starters who were on the IL. And I certainly like the way that the Mets fortified the bullpen, but it really felt like they needed a starting pitcher too. And one guy who was on my radar was Marlins ace Sandy Alcantara. And rumor has it that the Marlins were looking for 2 5 top prospects in the organization, along with another player. So, do you think that was too much for the Marlins to ask, given his season so far? I mean, he's got an ERA somewhere in the neighborhood of 6.5. So if you were the Mets GM, would you have paid that cost and given the boost to the rotation that an Alcantara would have?
Well, I think the reason that they wanted the price was so high is because there weren't many starting pitchers available. A, they could ask for it, and B, I think they believed that not all players bounce back from Tommy John at the same pace and same level. When you start looking at, Alcantara, he's got 2 years plus this year. He's under control. And for 38.3 million, you've got him for the next 2 years. I think we're going to see a far better pitcher than we have seen thus far this year. Again, the Mets starting pitching is okay. When you look at the additions to the bullpen, I think everything will work fine as long as they, keep Kode Senga from attempting to field balls.
I think
I,
it's more keeping Pete Alonso from throwing balls to the pitcher. My new nickname for him, forget the polar bear. Polar bear is out. My new nickname for Alonso is No Throw Pete.
There you go. That'll work perfect. Absolutely perfect. But no, again, it's a big ask. But at the same point in time, when you're talking a pitcher that has the potential, to be a very, very good pitcher who's under team control. What's the worst that happens to the Marlins? They obviously believe in the guy. Okay. The worst that happens is he bounces back as a member of the Miami Marlins, and next year they might get two of those top five prospects. So it's sort of a win-win for the Marlins, and uh, I think we're going to see a far better pitcher next year, Brian.
As a baseball fan, I sure hope so. The Marlins went on a nice little streak there right during and shortly after the trade deadline. And in that, they leapfrogged the Braves and they were in third place in the NL East. And that was without a whole bunch of meaningful contributions from Alcantara, although he did throw 12 shutout innings in his two starts before the trade
Yeah.
deadline. First start after the trade deadline, I think he gave up 6 runs in 7 innings. So it's still an
Yeah.
open question of what he would give you the rest of the way here in 2025. But like you mentioned, he comes with two additional controls beyond this year, which is why I think the Marlins were certainly justified in asking what they did.
Yep. Well, and we saw how many starting pitchers got moved.
Yeah,
Teams are holding on to them for dear life, and can you blame them?
no, everybody who wants to pay or wants to acquire them, they're maybe not necessarily willing to pay what the going freight is, and it's a little bit of all right, well, we can't do this, so what can we do instead? And everybody seemed to go for bullpen help, and hopefully it'll work out for the Mets better than it has so far for the Yankees.
Yeah, that hasn't worked out well on the other side of town, has it? Not
No.
at all. No.
All right. Well, I like to talk about big picture items when
Okay.
you're on the show, and one of the ones that stands out to me here lately is Commissioner Rob Manfred. He's going around and visiting with the players for teams, essentially trying to bypass the MLBPA and getting his side of the story out there, which is fine, but we just have to acknowledge what it is. And he recently met with the Phillies, and Bryce Harper didn't necessarily take his presence all that well. And in no uncertain terms, he invited Manfred to leave. So, if you were the commissioner and I was a player, how would you try to sell me on the benefits of a salary cap, which is what Manfred was trying to do?
I wouldn't. It's as simple as that, Brian. I
You're the
wouldn't.
commissioner. You work for the owners. This is your job, Tim. Step up to the plate.
Yeah,
Take a swing.
I don't want to be told to F off by Bryce Harper, okay? I don't want to be thrown out of the out of the Phillies. No, there's plenty of money in the game. Okay, it's simply a case of who wants to invest in their product and who wants to put cash in their pockets. That's my thought process. The other thing is, if you're going to try and sell a salary cap, it also has to come with a pretty hefty salary floor. And how do the owners feel about that? It's fine for Manfred to go on his big PR tour and get laughed at, I think, by the bulk of the players. But I haven't heard too much about Manfred talking about salary floors. Have you?
I have not, and part of that may be explained by the fact that once he starts talking about the salary cap, yeah, I essentially tune out. But the thing with Harper was just too big just to ignore. So,
Yeah. And I'm happy for Harper. Well, why shouldn't he speak his mind?
oh,
Yeah, yeah. Hey, under those circumstances, you have the guy that represents all of the owners in this game telling the players what they should be doing, what's in their best interests. Well, it's not in their best interests. It really isn't. It's a waste of time.
it's so important for the players, for somebody with the stature of a Harper to stand up and say, this is not good for us. And
Yeah,
even though someone of Harper's stature would get their money regardless of what system was used. It's the players 2 and 3 steps below him who would essentially suffer because of this. So, it's in Harper or for Harper, this is a principled stand.
yeah.
And it's not easy to find people willing to make a principled stand in these days. So I want to ask you kind of a follow-up question. And that's, what other professional leagues do you follow? Do they have a salary cap in those? And how has the cap affected you as a fan in those leagues?
Well, this is an interesting question, Brian, because I haven't watched a full NFL game in probably 20 years, including Super Bowls. Same with the NFL, and I've never been a big basketball fan. I'm I'm baseball 365, and
Surely
as
you must be a hockey fan.
uh,
You're from
uh,
Canada, isn't that like a law up there?
it's like a law, and they've threatened to, to boot me out, take my passport, and everything else. But I haven't watched. I watched the junior hockey, the World Junior Championship at the over the Christmas break. But other than that, I haven't watched a full NFL game, NHL game in probably 25 years.
Wow,
I I
I'm
got tied.
shocked.
Yeah,
Shocked.
I well, what I found was as I started spending more and more time with baseball, I like to be able to do what I think is a very thorough job of everything that I tackle. And what I found was, and I did play in fantasy NFL and followed the game. Same with the NHL. But what I found was the more time that I spent with baseball, the more I loved it and enjoyed it. And I just hey, I tip my cap to people in the industry that can follow multiple sports, but I can't. I spend time looking at Asia and I got more involved in that. And then I started looking at the minor leagues and the draft and the whole product. And I probably spend 30 a week uh, with baseball. I don't have any time or any inclination to spend it with any other sports. Like I said, I know it's a bit different, but it's if I'm going to do something, I like to do it well, and I can't split my time. And I'm not really interested in splitting my time. I love the game of baseball. It's
I admire your loyalty, but I have to ask a follow-up question hearing about this, and that's who's the next prospect from the Far East that's gonna, wow us? Who's the next Yamamoto or Otani?
I think the player that will be watching this off season is Munataka.
Wasn't he the guy who came over and for the Giants in 1965?
Close, maybe his grandson, but no, he's a big bat, big time power. What is sort of interesting is there was a commitment made to post him after this season, and his team is following through on that posting, but he's been injured most of the year, and he's just back in the game. So there is some question about whether Murakami will take another year to boost his value before the posting. But he's the guy right now, and I don't think that'll be the case. I think he'll come over this year, and we're talking big time power. That's the guy that I would focus on for now. There are some really good and great players, but I don't think any of them are around the corner types.
So let's keep Murakami on our long range mindset, and who knows, maybe he'll end up on the Mets where he should be.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've
I,
got
I
one.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I have one more, I guess, salary cap related idea that I want to throw out to you. And as a fantasy baseball mogul, you play all different kinds of formats. So
Mhm.
if you were involved in an auction format, where typically each owner has $260 to spend to assemble their team, would you play in an auction league where you drew straws and one team gets to play with the Dodgers payroll and another team gets to play with the Rays?
The format itself doesn't really interest me per se. I think when you look at the Dodgers and relate it to our game, the fantasy game is based on totals accumulated by individual players. Okay, the Dodgers will definitely have more useful chips than the Rays, which again, even though they have the excess chips or more chips, I don't think it would be as dominating as one might think because of the categories in play. When you take a look at Simpson, he's going to give you the stolen base category. Pete Fairbanks will give you the saves category. Junior Caminero is one of the best young players in the game, and he's one of my picks for AL MVP for next year. And the Rays have more healthy starting pitching. Hey,
Well, let me interrupt you for just 1 second, Tim. So typical auction league, $260 for every owner. But
Mhm.
what about trying, we're in a sense trying to emulate being an MLB GM with the auction values, certainly.
Right.
So, would it interest you if to play in a league auction format where one team had, I don't know what the top payroll off my head is,
Mhm.
350 million. So one owner would draw the right to be that team and have a 350 payroll, and another owner would draw whatever the Rays payroll is, 70. So
How about the Colorado Rockies? That's an easy choice.
well, I mean, it's not necessarily playing with the players on that team. It's being limited to what those owners are limit themselves to when
Mhm.
they are assembling payroll. So you would have, instead of everybody being equal and have 260 dollars worth of players, one
Yeah.
team has 350 and another team has 70.
Yeah, well, obviously, we know how that's going to work out, right?
Do we? How much of the value by the end of the year has a team accumulated by picking up guys from the waiver wire? And if you weren't
True.
able to get any of the top stars because you were limited on payroll, you would spend your prep work trying to figure out who the players who were going to have full-time jobs and who had a chance to turn in, a much more valuable season.
Yeah, the problem with that is uh, you're playing up against 14 other owners per se, right? Oh, to bid on and acquire the rights of those players. So that makes it a bit of a challenge. It's not like you can just go out and grab the best free agents out of the free agent pool. You'll be bidding up against other players. So I don't know. Uh, I like our game.
You would be acquiring those players during the initial draft while everybody else
Okay.
is chasing Otani and Skeens and whoever the
Yeah.
top guys are and spending all of their money there. You've got to be more focused on, well, who's going to give me the most bang for the buck in the lower tier of name. I mean, I think it would be an interesting.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting as well. I personally, I like one or two star type players, and I've had an awful lot of success out of the middle tier when constructing teams.
I
But
think you've just volunteered yourself to have the $70 million.
I'd have fun with it.
Well, good. I hope that we have fun in whichever way we consume the game.
Yes.
I'd like to turn this back around to the real game, get away from the fantasy, and talk about a guy who pitched for the Mets last year, and that's Luis Severino. And Severino had a very nice bounce back year last year. Was a
Mhm.
free agent again and signed with the West Sacramento Athletics because they gave him more years and more money than anyone else would. The only issue is that he's getting killed in his new home park. He's
See,
got
ever.
a 6+ ERA in his new park and an ERA just over 3 in neutral road parks. So try to put yourself in Severino's shoes. How do you think he feels with his decision to chase the dollars and put himself essentially in baseball purgatory?
Well, he's put himself in baseball purgatory, but he's not sitting there drinking sodas at McDonald's at the same point in time. Okay. That's pretty solid contract that he signed for 25, 26, and 27. Uh, again, what was it, 10 million signing bonus on what, 67 million guaranteed? I think he knew the risk going in, and his motivation is the fact that he's making good money.
Oh, no one questions the decision from a financial standpoint. But
Right.
at what point is enough? So
Uh,
he has made at least $50 million in his career prior to this new contract. He's probably made a lot more than that, but confirmed $50 million. So it's
right.
not like he's drinking sodas on the road anyway. You know, he
Yeah.
had his life, his children's life, and his grandchildren's life taken care of. And I'm pro player. I'm
Yeah.
all for the players getting as much as they possibly can. I don't want to see the fat cat owners keeping the money. I want the players to get the money. But at some
Right.
point, why would you willingly play in West Sacramento?
Well, he's got what, 2 more years left on that deal, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a 2-year deal with a third-year player option. I didn't
Player option.
recognize that at first, but it's a player option, so he can at least bail after the conclusion of 2026.
Well, he might not want to bail. Okay, and the reason I say that is when you start looking at the Athletics, they got themselves a really, really fine team. Jacob Wilson was the leader in the Rookie of the Year race until Nick Kurtz showed up, and Nick Kurtz is, yeah. What can you say about what Nick Kurtz has done? Shea Langeliers is a fine player. Soderstrom. The A's could have a very, very good team inside of the next 2 years. He might want to re up. I don't know what he does as far as the splits in his home park, but unless, again, I'm going to have to do some investigation and look at more than just Severino and see how the rest of that rotation is doing. And I haven't done that. We've seen some success from Jacob Lopez. Jeffrey Springs is not a bad pitcher. I got to spend a little bit more time in the off season looking at, maybe, hey, 90% of the game is half mental. Maybe the problem is with Luis Severino. And I'm looking at Springs. He's got an ERA of 4 and OPA 117. I'll have to check the splits, but I think I think he decided he wanted to get that contract, and the A's decided they were going to pay him, and they have an agreement in place. And despite the home road problems, Severino knew what he was getting in for potentially. So, hey, does he take that third year? I think it depends how he pitches in the second of this deal.
So we knew from the way that this ballpark played in AAA that it was going to be a hitter's park. Maybe
Mhm.
we didn't know the extent. Maybe
Yep.
it's been more Coors Field than anyone would have expected. But I can't see how any agent would have allowed their client to sign there without a full understanding of, hey,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
you were in a pitcher's park last year with the Mets. Now you're going to be in something at least somewhat more like Coors Field than
Yep.
City Field. And it's the way that it's played out so far, and it doesn't, just because that's the way it's played out now doesn't mean the way that it's going to play out, the remainder of his contract. But the way that it's played out is it's been a super park for hitters. And
Yep.
so he's on a team that's 20 games under 500, and he's getting lit up pitching
Yep.
half of his games in a hitter's park. I can't imagine that that's a good feeling. And
No.
one more,
Yeah, I
go
would
ahead.
think I agree with you, Brian. I think it's got to be a challenge, but at the same point in time, it's a challenge he signed up for.
One more thing that I want to throw out into the
Okay.
discussion, and that's after the season started, it came to light that the Mets tried to sign Severino,
Okay.
re-sign him, and Severino tried to re-up with the Mets. The Mets offered him the Frankie Montas contract, which was 234 and a half, I believe, and
Okay.
Severino had countered with 240. So they weren't tons of money, dollars apart, but it was not, I don't know if he was insulted by the offer, thought that what he did, he deserved more. Certainly don't blame him for thinking that he was worth more than what the Mets offered. But I just got to feel if I'm Severino sitting on 50, $60 million of cash and getting my brains beat out in half of the games that I pitch, I got to start wondering, does having the financial comfort for 4 generations, 5 generations, 6 generations after me, people who I will never meet in my life,
Mhm.
is it worth it?
Yeah, it's to him it was.
Speaking of the A's and their new park, we know
Yeah,
that, let's see, they're going to be in the minor league park for 3 years.
right.
This one and two more following, and after that they'll be in a brand new park in Las Vegas.
Mhm.
And the Rays are up for sale. They're going to get a new owner, and you would think that MLB will fix it so that whoever wins the bid is going to be able to get the stadium situation resolved in Tampa or somewhere nearby.
Uh-huh.
So those are the last two teams that needed to threaten, oh, I'll move to so and so.
Right.
So with the threat of relocation off of the table, expansion's coming. I don't see any other way to look at the situation other than that. Even if it wasn't a financial boon to the owners, it just makes more sense to have 32 teams, 16 teams in a league for 14 divisions. I mean, the math just works so much better.
Well, sure it does, but again, with the game now, with basically a balanced schedule, the divisions and all of it. Yeah, hey,
It'll be even more balanced with 32 though.
well, sure it will. Eight divisions of four equals 32. And when you start looking at the potential sites for new teams, there's a way to, I believe, make it work that works well for the game as a whole.
I'm right there with you. So I want to know, what two cities do you support to get those expansion franchises that are going to come in 5 years or so?
The two that would be at the top of my list, and one of these I definitely support in a big way because I'm still a fan. When people ask me who my team is, it's the
Montreal
Montreal
Expos.
it's the Montreal Expos. Yeah, it is. And I think they should get a shot at getting back in the game. I think they've
I
got
agree completely. So what's your other one?
Portland.
Portland. So
Yeah.
the Portland hipsters, you're ready.
Well, I think if you're going to look at a balanced schedule, okay, I think you should also look geographically at new teams as East and West. Okay, if you're going to add one on the East Coast, get one on the West Coast, and vice versa. So I think that fits, and I think you could look at Montreal as possibly being an AL team and put them in the same East Division as the Toronto Blue Jays and Boston and the Yankees. You could take Portland and put them into an NL West division. I think it would work well, and I think both communities have the population. They have things in place. They're well organized. Portland's getting a new park, if I'm not mistaken. The Expos can play in the Big O until they build a park, and they will. Montreal drew a lot of fans up until the strike that destroyed that. And I can't blame Montreal fans for taking the approach that they did. They sort of cut off their nose to spite their face, but at the same point in time, they let Major League Baseball know what they thought of what happened to them. That's my two choices, but there are a lot of other teams that will be lobbying hard and also have an equal opportunity of getting into the game.
Throw me two more cities' names.
I don't think we need another team in California right now. How about Charlotte and possibly Nashville?
Yeah,
There's a
I think
couple.
Nashville's definitely gotta be on the list. All right, so you gave me four cities,
Yeah.
and I think those are solid four cities. But I've got a really offbeat. Actually, I
Okay.
should have used this for my question on the crazy prediction, but
Okay.
I didn't. But I want to throw this out to you, and this is offbeat. I admit it 100%. But you look at the team that you talked about earlier, the Colorado Rockies, which doesn't have the greatest ownership situation.
Right.
Bad ownership, bad teams. They draw like crazy. They have great attendance. And yes, some of that is because they have a really nice ballpark. Not all of it, but some of it.
Yeah.
So there's nobody anywhere around Colorado. I don't know who the closest major league team is. My geography is terrible. If you told me it was St. Louis, I'd say okay. You told me it was Minnesota, I'd say sounds about right. You told me it was Seattle, I'd say I can see that. I don't know. I don't
Sure.
know who the closest one is, but there's nobody close.
No,
So
they don't. They're not like Baltimore competing with every.
yeah, with six different other teams.
Yeah,
So
all in a
is
day's
there
drive.
is there a city anywhere remotely close to them that would be a suitable expansion city? The first one that jumps to mind is Salt Lake City,
I
and I don't know, but I'm just wondering if we need to tap into, like you said, you don't need another team in California. How about where do we need a team? And I think that's one way that you could potentially approach expansion was like, where do we need a team? Where can we grow the game? And I think that we've grown the game in Colorado, and there may not be a city in Montana with 1 million people in it, but maybe it's a great place to grow the game.
Yeah, and maybe here's another option if you want to look at that game. Put a team in Mexico City.
That's been floated before. To the best of
Yeah,
my knowledge, nobody has ever said, "Hey, let's put a team in Montana."
yeah,
But they played MLB games in Mexico. Maybe not Mexico City, but in Mexico. The
yeah,
Padres played there.
yeah. And hey, at least you have two teams that have high elevation parks for home. Oh, yeah, you can put Colorado and Mexico City in the same division and sort of lump all the potential bad pitching spots in one division, and it might be competitive.
It may not be the worst idea that's ever been thrown out on this program. And I think that's a perfect segue into our
Uh,
crazy idea segment. I'll give you what I think is a crazy idea, and then
okay,
I'll ask you to comment on it. And then we'll
right.
flip roles. You'll give me your crazy idea, and I'll comment on it. So you ready?
I'm ready to roll. I like this segment, Brian.
So you gave four expansion cities, and we talked about one or two others. And nowhere on this list was a team that I think is a dark horse candidate for expansion franchise. You mentioned Charlotte, but there will be separate bids for Charlotte and Raleigh. And Raleigh is about 3 hours away from Charlotte. But I
Right.
think that Raleigh, my crazy prediction is that Raleigh will be one of the final four expansions. I don't think that they will get a team, but I think they will advance to the final round. They'll be one of the final four expansion cities. So tell me, how crazy is that?
I don't think it is crazy. If they
Stuff.
put together a good program, they're well organized, and their committee has all the I's dotted and T's crossed. Uh, the problem there, at least for me, is that another East Coast team, and then you have to add another California team. You know what I mean? How many teams do you want on the East Coast? Do you want to expand the game regionally, or hey? And I think they could very easily finish as one of the top bidding teams, but because of the East, I don't see them putting a team in there. Totally crazy, no, but in my opinion, I just don't think geographically it works as well as some of the other potential sites.
All right. So I took a swing and a miss. So you're up. Grab your bat, and show me what a crazy idea looks like.
Okay. The Seattle Mariners win the World Series this year in 7 games over the Milwaukee Brewers in a thriller, and all we hear about is how the advertising revenues are down.
Well, people certainly like to look for anything negative that they can focus, and if the advertising revenue is down, then no doubt that they will harp on that. So that part doesn't seem crazy to me. The Mariners winning it all, that's certainly crazier. I'm not sure. And my initial reaction is it's tough to pick any one team to win the World Series just because you have to have luck along the way. I mean, how many
Yeah.
years have the Dodgers had 95 or more wins and been the best team in baseball in the last dozen years, and they've only won it twice. So
Look at the '90s Braves, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, picking one team to win certainly has at least a tinge of craziness baked into it. But after you poo-pooed on my idea, now I've got to sit here and rub my chin and wonder, do I give him the satisfaction of having his thing be crazy?
I
So
wouldn't.
Well, you came up with it, so how about
Uh,
this? I will
uh,
whip out and
okay.
I will call your forecast there 80% crazy. How about that?
That works for me, Brian. Perfectly fine. I thought for sure that, I mentioned Milwaukee, with your allegiance to the Mets and everything. Now, if I would have said that Seattle wins it over the Mets in 7 games,
I would have said that's absolutely crazy because of the way they're playing now, the Mets may not even make the playoffs, much less advance to the World Series. But anyway, you you
uh,
you mentioned them, so let's take a second talking about them. Everyone, if you ask them, "Oh, what's the model franchise?" I think that by far the most common answer will be, well, if you don't focus too much on the money, you got to say, well, look at what the Dodgers have done. But if you do factor money into that, they'll talk about the Rays, and the Rays certainly
yeah,
deserve kudos. But
yeah,
dear God, what do the Brewers have to do? The Brewers, they lose players. They can't. They're never in the running for a Yamamoto or a Soto or any of the big ticket free agent items. They
correct.
lose their
Yeah,
GM. They lose their manager. It doesn't matter. They just keep putting out good team after good team, and
yeah,
I think they deserve a lot of credit that they don't get national.
yeah. I totally agree. You look at that team this year, and Woodruff has returned, but they've gotten a lot of mileage out of Quinn Priester and Henderson. Uh, you know, Jacob Mizorowski. Yeah, he's dealing with a tibia contusion right now, but he'll be back. Again, more kids. Sal Frelick is one of their products internally. Jackson Churio, again, great young player. The Brewers do a fine job, okay, of their farm system is they develop major leaguers and they do a great job at it. And you're right, they don't get the recognition that they probably deserve to. They're one of the few teams that didn't go out at the deadline and look to improve their bullpen. Them and the Mariners were two teams that, hey, they didn't even look at their pitch. They both have good pitching. And it's impressive to see teams working within the system that is in place. They can develop talent. Good for them. It's like Cleveland can develop pitching. Okay. Yeah, it's impressive when a team does that.
All right. Well, this is the Mets 360 podcast. So let's finish this up talking about the Mets a little more. As a fantasy baseball guy, you undoubtedly know some of the team's top prospects. So if you were playing in a keeper league, just starting up, everybody available, which two Mets who've yet to make their MLB debut would you be targeting?
Well, I went with one pitcher and one positional player, and I love Jonathan. I really do. The fastball and the changeup are great. They're ready. They're MLB ready. All he needs is a little bit better curveball, and he's good to go. I'm all in on Jonathan. I think he is going to be a very good pitcher for a very long time.
Any worries about that windup?
Hey, it makes it work. I'm just trying to think of a comp.
Well, the one that gets thrown out the most is Tim Lincecum.
That's
And
exactly what I was going to say, Lincecum, because he's got the big stride, eh?
that and the extreme over the top. One of the guys that the Mets just acquired is Tyler Rogers, and
Right.
Tyler Rogers is perhaps the biggest submarine pitcher in the game today. And it would
Right.
just be very curious to see what the angle difference in their deliveries would be because Rogers is almost at
Yeah.
6 o'clock and
Mhm.
Tong is somewhere around 11 o'clock, 11:30. I
Yeah, I
mean,
was
he
gonna
is he is incredibly over the top. And Lincecum, he had a great career, but
yeah.
he also was done at I don't know off the top of my head when his last season in the majors was, but he was done at like 32. He was done early. He was
Yeah.
not Steve Carlton or Tom Seaver pitching into their 40s. I
No,
mean, he
no.
was he was shot. And the question hanging over Tong is, can someone with that delivery be a really long term thing, or do you just say, well, he's going to be great for 7 years, and then that's it, and that's fine.
Well, I think if you take a look at the game, how many pitchers sustain careers of 5 plus years in a starting capacity?
I have no idea what the number is, but I think that the one thing that's been consistent throughout is people will always talk about this is the end of the starting pitcher dominance. And we heard about that in the 70s. And you certainly hear about it now. Oh, there'll never be another 300 game winner again, blah 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 blah. But we've got Max Scherzer, who's what, 38, 39, and he's still out there. And when he's healthy, he's still a good hurler.
Yeah.
Verlander is in his, he has the same injury problems, but you said before, if you get 5 innings out of your starting pitcher, you're doing okay. And Verlander, even at his advanced baseball age, can still give you 5 innings. So these guys, and shoot, Rich Hill was back in the majors for a brief time, and I
Yeah.
think he's 47.
Yeah, I
So
was I was gonna say, yeah, yeah. But again, the game has changed in a lot of regards. When you were talking about pitching going 7, 8 innings, they weren't throwing at 100 miles an hour.
no, and they weren't facing the lineups that teams put out. I know on my blog, this is a constant thing with some of the older, even older than you, if you can believe that. Some of the older readers, they're talking about, oh well, when Nolan Ryan came up, he could blah 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 blah.
Right.
Yeah, he was facing teams with a pitcher hitting and middle infield combo that couldn't hit to save their life, a center fielder who changed every day. There was 4 or 5 dead spots in most teams' lineups. And it wasn't like, it was the expansion Padres. So no, it's clubs who were there all along. They didn't have good lineups. So you could coast through that. And then, when Ernie Banks came up, you could give him your A stuff. Now you have to give your A stuff to just about everybody.
Yeah, the game is definitely conditioning, training. It's not the same game. It isn't. And, it's fair to say, well, these guys did it. Well, yeah, but as you mentioned, circumstances have changed a little bit, Brian. And to make those comparisons, and again, you're looking at Nolan Ryan. He was a freak of nature. He really was. Pedro Martinez, another one, a small guy. Okay,
All
with
right. So since
big
since we
velocity.
talked about since we talked about him,
Yeah,
when I say his name, tell me the first thing that pops into your head. Okay. Doesn't have to be great, doesn't have to be small, just whatever the first
yeah.
thing that pops in your head. Nolan Ryan.
Okay.
What's the first thing
Fastball.
that
Fastball.
fastball? So and that absolutely should be the answer. Fastball or longevity. Somehow in my warped little brain, when I hear Nolan Ryan, the first thing I think of is putting Robin Ventura in a headlock and giving them about 6 or 7 punches to the head. And
Well, you
admittedly,
know what I was mulling over? You know why the hesitation?
why? What?
Because I was gonna say Robert Mitch.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
so out of
Oh,
character. So you
yeah.
just weren't expecting it.
Well, and you know what? The cocky kid got taught a lesson by an old guy. And how can you not like that? Okay, I don't care how much you follow the game, just the whole principle, the setup, everything. It couldn't get
just
any
imagine,
better.
just imagine you're Robin Ventura,
Yeah.
okay, and you're less than pleased because Nolan has buzzed you, so you come out to the mound, and you're really not sure what you're going to do when you're out there because come on, it's Nolan Ryan.
Right.
And then the next thing you know, the old guy puts you in the headlock and
And
starts punching you. I
yes.
mean, what can you do? You can't punch Nolan Ryan. It'd
Yeah.
be like punching Betty White.
Yeah.
How are you going to hit a baseball senior citizen? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I have a little, I feel a little bit bad for Ventura.
Yeah, I do, but at the same point in time, it never hurts to be humble, does it?
We could all use that in our lives. All right. Well, I got one more question for you, Tim,
Okay.
and that's with the prize of this past year's free agent class, Juan Soto.
Oh, I forgot to mention my second guy. Can I squeeze him in real quick,
Sure.
Brian? You're okay?
Sure.
Okay, Carson Benji.
Yes, your hitter
Yeah,
for the guy.
for your
Yep,
Mets.
yep, yep.
Gimme, 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 gimme. Like I think we're gonna see him definitely next year, and I love what I'm seeing. He's got power. You don't see big stolen base numbers, but he's got the speed. 1090 OPS. He knows the strike zone. There is so much to like with this kid. If I was building a dynasty keeper type format, yeah, he's definitely one of the players I want on my team.
Well, I'm glad that you brought us back to that. For me, it's a coin flip if it's Benj or if it's Jet Williams.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Jet Williams has been at Double A all year long, and I think he's either the same age or a few months younger than Benj.
Okay.
The Mets drafted Williams out of high school, and Benj, of course, went to college. But to me, that's one of those cases where I'll give you first pick, and I'll be happy with who's ever left over. You know,
Yeah.
the big thing is, you know, where are they going to play? It's
Right.
less of a question with Benj just because he's an outfielder and they've got Soto in right and they've got Brandon Nimmo in left. So there's pretty much only one place he can play. And can he be a good enough defensive fielder to play? And I don't think the bar is that high, but certainly coming into this year, that was the question. And I think he's answered that.
Yeah,
He
I
hasn't
agree.
been exclusively a center fielder, but he's played enough, and I don't think that there's been any you don't want to see him in center. You know, I haven't heard any rumblings of that. So I think he's certainly good enough to play there given the options. So, you know, is he better than Williams there? Or will the Mets finally say, you know, Williams, you're 5'1" or you whatever however tall you are, you're a second baseman and play him there because he's not going to play shortstop because Lindor's there.
And with the arm that Williams has, he can play third base.
Yeah, you know,
I would
if
prefer second, but I mean,
right, right.
there's a place in that infield
Yes.
for Jet Williams. It's not going to be shortstop in the short term, but there is a place. So I'm not too concerned about the fact that the path should be easier. The path I think is just going to be different.
Right, right. So I always like to think of some kind of comps. And usually when you think of third baseman, you think of somebody like Scott Rowland,
Mhm.
who is what, 6'4"?
Yeah,
You know,
big. Yep.
typically the guys who grew up as shortstop but are too big for the position, you know, if they can hit,
Yep.
boom, there's your third baseman. But I guess Ron Say wasn't.
Troy Gloss is a another one.
Yes,
A
yes.
big kid. Yes.
But Ron Say couldn't have been much taller than
Yeah.
Jet Williams, so
No.
it's certainly not unheard of for a tiny third base. And even David Wright, he's bigger, but he wasn't, you know, in that Klaus or Roland range of tall third baseman.
How big is Jose Ramirez?
I don't even have a guess. If you told me he was 6'7", I'd say really, but in the back of my mind, it's like, oh, maybe I'm just wrong.
He's 5'9".
Really? All right. Well, there you go. There you go. Again, that's bigger than Williams, who you know, I jokingly said 5'1". I think he's 5'6".
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's with lifts and issues. I don't know, but he's not a big guy. He's
No.
not a big guy. All right. Well, we started to talk about Soto, and as I'm sure you know, Soto broke up a no hitter in the ninth inning this afternoon with a home
Mhm.
run to straightaway center.
Yes.
Mets fans are a little peeved at Soto's production. Seems like he does quite well when nobody's on base, and as soon as you put runners on, he does his best Ray Oyler imitation. You know, a guy who just can't hit to save his life. So
Yeah.
this is a weird question. I understand.
Mhm.
Do you think that we should be worried about a 15-year contract to a guy who's just not coming anywhere close to expectations?
Well, I took a look at the numbers, okay, and when you look at the overall package, he's on pace to have potentially his second best season from a home run perspective. Okay, he's looking at runs scored. It could be his second best season in runs scored. His RBI total is going to finish top three, top four. His OBP's down a little bit. It's only 383, and he's never had an OBP under 400. You can get it up there a little bit. He's stolen more bases this year than he ever has, and by a considerable margin. His two best years were 12 prior to this year. He's up to 17. For the life of me, Brian, hey, now granted, I don't watch the Mets or follow them like you do, okay? But when I just look at the raw data and the numbers, I think he's having a great year. I wouldn't be at all concerned about Juan Soto as a Mets fan until the last 5 years of that contract.
So I think that you make an excellent case for him as a fantasy player.
Uh-huh.
But I think that, perhaps selfishly, perhaps misguided on what he did last season,
Uh-huh.
being more in the front of Mets fans' minds, where he did absolutely wonderful when he came up with runners in scoring position. And
Okay.
and I know that that is not necessarily a skill.
Uh-huh.
It's more good fortune than skill, what you happen to hit in this particular subset of appearances. But
Right.
it's frustrating. It's very frustrating when you see Soto come up to the plate and hit like Luis Angel Acuna when all of a sudden there's runners on base. Yeah, he's just not getting the job done. And you mentioned his RBI. It's like, well, yeah, he's hitting all these homers, and
Uh-huh.
three-quarters of them are with nobody on base, but still that's an RBI right there. And he's got, I don't know, 25, 26 homers now.
Yeah.
So I mean that's certainly juicing the RBI numbers somewhat. And what I try to keep in the front of my mind, and as well as mention to other people, is that the first year Lindor was here, he didn't do very well. The first year Carlos Beltran was here, he didn't do very well. And
Yep.
they turned it around after that. And I think that as frustrating as it may be to see Soto walk up to the plate in key situations and watch him hit into another 4-3, I think we have to give him some grace, and say this is not going to be the results we're going to get for the next 15 years, 14 years.
Yeah, and you know what? How much would it take, Brian, for again, the runners in scoring position? If he goes on little bit of a tear, right, and that changes, and he starts driving in runners on base instead of hitting into those 4 threes, how long would it take for people's mindset to change? Like I guess it's all about expectations, and I don't know what the expectations were for Soto, but if you just look at it purely on paper, he's pretty much delivering. But again, there are the intangibles that a lot of us who don't follow the Mets as closely as you don't see. I've heard grumblings about this, that, and the next. I think Juan Soto is one of the best players in the game. I think he will be for a long time.
All right. So here are his numbers with runners in scoring position. He has
Okay.
127 plate appearances, which isn't a huge sample, but I mean it's not like we're talking about 15.
Right.
127 is not an insignificant number of plate appearances. He's hitting 184, and his OPS, he does have 5 homers with runners in scoring position, so his OPS
Okay.
is somewhat close to
Wow.
average, in that he's got a 690. That's probably like an OPS plus of 90 if it
Yeah.
was for somebody for an entire season playing in the ballparks he does. But that 184,
Yeah.
you were asking how
Yeah.
many it would take. I think for Mets fans, if he came up 3 times in a row and delivered a hit with runners in scoring position, all would be forgiven.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that he was necessarily good, from a year long perspective, if he went 3 for 3 his next 3 times,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think he's a very good baseball player, and
Oh, without a doubt.
I
Without
think
a
he
doubt.
I think he's going to be a very good player for a long time. Like I said, if I was worried about the contract, it's a 15-year deal that brings him into his age 41 season, right? Yeah.
Assuming there is an opt out after 5 years. So it's always talked about, because people like big sensational numbers. It's always talked
Right.
about 15,775 or whatever the final number is, but it's a 5-year contract
Yeah.
when you add in the or you factor in the opt out.
Yeah, I wouldn't see any reason for concern until after the age 36, 37 season. And when I look at 15-year, when I see 15-year contracts, is that really a 10-year contract spread out over 15?
Right, right, and to a certain extent, I mean, I don't think you
Yeah,
can 100% look at it that way, but at least part of you has to look at it as like, well, we're paying at the back end for the front end production. So
exactly. Yeah, that's when I see contracts of that duration, that my first thought is, yeah, you're paying for the front end. And moving forward, I like the Mets. I really do. I There's not much I don't like about that team. And ownership is has proven they're willing to go out and get the players and do what has to be done to bring a World Series to the good side of New York.
now can you just get our hitters to, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
hit?
Well, and keep Cody
If we could do
Singer
something
from
about that.
catching from making the play at first base. Yeah, like I said, I think the Mets have got a bright future, and hey, your farm system's got some great talent. It really does. We
I
just
am.
mentioned a couple guys today, but it's a good, well-run organization with an owner that's interested in winning. What more can you ask for in today's game?
Some luck with hitting with runners in scoring position.
There you go. Yeah,
All
and a
right,
pitcher
Tim.
pitcher that stays healthy.
Yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
can I get greedy? Can I ask
yeah,
you one more question?
sure. Yeah, go for it, Brian.
All right. So we've established that you're a fan of MLB and you are not a fan of the Mets, but it's good to get outsiders' perspective.
Right.
So could you give me a player on the team who you think is underrated and a player that you think is overrated, given what they've actually done?
Underrated right now. I really think that the Rays Junior Caminero
No, no, I'm sorry,
or
Mets. This is Mets 360. By God, we're
oh
talking
dear
about the
Lord, dear.
Mets.
Okay, okay. Tim. That is reason for 40 lashes in a
You
public
were
spot.
You were going for the low-hanging fruit there. I'll just say, the Mets had just finished up a 3-game series with the Guardians. And the Guardians, if we were to look at this from a Major League Baseball universe instead of a Mets universe, I don't know how many times Mets broadcaster Gary Cohen has talked about Jose Ramirez being one of the most underrated players in the
Yeah.
game today. And I don't know all of the relevant numbers, but he's year in year out he's all-star level player, and very few people think of him. All right, so I'm sorry, no low-hanging fruit. It's the Mets, and
It's the
so I
Mets.
want underrated. And I know it's hard for anybody in a major metropolitan area to be underrated. I
Right.
granted, I get it, but I'm looking for you to give me an underrated player and an overrated player. So maybe the thing to do is to start out with the Mets overrated player.
Overrated player. I think at some point in time, and that time has pretty well arrived, they got to move on from Jeff McNeil.
Wow. All right. All right. So we've and McNeil is kind of a polarizing player among Mets fans. We've heard so much about um, Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos and
Right.
Ronnie Mauricio that
Yep.
everybody wants to see them get their shot, and they feel like the best way for that to happen is to jettison McNeil. And the only problem with that is McNeil is still pretty darn productive, and it's far from a sure thing that those guys would be able to match, much less exceed McNeil's production. So
And
I think
that's why you have Jet Williams, right?
exactly, exactly. All right, so you would have a lot of support from Mets fans on your overrated player. All right, so hit me with your underrated guy.
Underrated in the current lineup. I know he hasn't set the world on fire since you acquired him at the deadline, but I like Cedric Mullins a lot. I think he brings a lot to your team, and I think it was a very wise acquisition. Heading into next year, hey, you got a kid I really like down on the farm that could probably play center field.
I think he's strictly a
So,
rental.
what do they do with Brandon Nemo? He's going on 33.
Yeah, if he doesn't stop striking out, they're gonna put him on the bench. That's what they're gonna do with him. He's
Well,
he's in a
yeah,
he's in a rare
lately,
funk. Yeah,
yeah, he's
but
been in a funk,
he's the
but
left fielder. I mean,
yeah,
he would have to continue performing this poorly the rest of the year for them not to consider him the opening day left fielder next year.
yeah, I agree. I underrated. I like Cedric Mullins a lot. I think he's going to bring a lot to your team down the stretch.
All right, so that was a very tough question for me to just throw at you there last second. And
That's
Mullins is probably as good of an answer as you could come up with because it's hard to find anyone on a major team who doesn't get their praises sung one way or the other.
Francisco Alvarez would be another candidate. I think there's a lot more than what we've seen, and injuries have come into play there. But uh, man, if Alvarez goes on the tear, he could hit home runs in bunches, couldn't he?
I would like to see anyone hit home runs in bunches to get out of this offensive funk that we're in currently. They sent Alvarez down. He was in the minor leagues for I don't know about a month or so,
Yeah,
and he came back in, and you never know with team not supported broadcasters for the team who,
right.
as fans we hope that they're objective, but you never know if they, hey, why don't you say nice things about Alvarez if they're getting pressure to toe the company line. But they've been
Right.
very encouraging about Alvarez both offensively and defensively since he's returned from the minors.
Well, he's only 23 years old.
Yes, yes.
There's a lot of players playing at AAA,
Or
chomping at the bit
lower,
to get an opportunity that are
or
older than
especially
23.
at catcher. And yeah, I think Mullins was fantastic in what was it, 2021, and he's kind of been trending downwards ever since. So I like Francisco Alvarez as the answer to that question. I think he's somebody who world of talent. We just need to see him do it for um, you know the rest of the season and beyond. Well, Tim, love having you on the show. I love the passion and the knowledge that you bring, and it's very good to get out of the echo chamber and hear opinions about the Mets from somebody who doesn't necessarily live and die with them. So thank you again for being on with us.
Totally my pleasure, Brian. Anytime you need anybody to talk baseball, just give me a call. I want to thank you so much for again having me on and the opportunity to discuss some baseball. And here's wishing you and your New York Mets a strong stretch run and deep into the playoffs for you.
Thank you much. And can you give us the elevator speech, the quick synopsis of Prospect 361?
Yeah, at Prospect 361, I do a weekly waiver wire and closer report, and Wilson handles all the prospects. He catches between 80 and 100 minor league games a year, so he's not scouting the stat line. He's in the park with his radar gun and his stopwatch doing his bit. And if you're looking for a site that provides a slew of real information on prospects, give Rich's place a visit and see what he has to say. I think you'll be impressed. And again, thanks for the opportunity to talk up the site a little bit, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. And if you've stuck with us to the end, I think you definitely owe it to yourself to visit Prospect 361. Thanks again to Tim and everyone. Have a good night.